G'day geeks, my name is Chris, and recently I had the opportunity to speak about Dungeons and Dragons, something I'm quite passionate about. So I managed to do a presentation to two libraries, the City of Perth Library and the City of Belmont Library, which are both local to where I live. So I thought in honour of the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, I reached out to them this year to see if there would be any interest, or if there was, from the community about D&D, because it's very in the public consciousness these days in a way that it never has been before, thanks to Stranger Things and the movie, and just generally people playing it a lot more. So we had about 40-ish people come to both occasions, and there was some good conversations, there were some prizes, it was a lot of fun. So I'm just going to do a condensed version of those presentations on this video here. So let's talk all about Dungeons and Dragons and its funny dice. This year is the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, so I wonder if people are interested to hear about what this game is, how it started, where it's going, how do you play it, that kind of thing. I used to play it in high school, and I got back into it about 3 or so years ago with my colleagues, and it's been a tremendous blessing for me and a lot of fun, and formed some great friendships. So I basically just wanted to answer some FAQ in a library kind of setting. So I emailed the City of Perth Library and the Belmont Library, both of which are near to me, and said, hey, you don't know me, I'm not a Dungeons & Dragons expert by any stretch of the imagination, but do you get inquiries about people asking about Dungeons & Dragons? I know a lot of libraries host events and that kind of thing and have workshops and regular sessions. So both the libraries said yes, and it went from there. So yeah, I was really quite honoured to present two different occasions. So I had about an hour each with questions and answers and some wonderful prizes and giveaways at the end, and people were lining up afterwards on both occasions to talk to me and with each other, which was so heartwarming and so nice. So this is going to be a brief look at the presentation all about the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons and the game itself in this format. Here we go. The most common question I get asked, because a lot of people know I play D&D, is what actually is it? So I always describe it, as a lot of other people do, as a collaborative storytelling game. There's no winner, there's no loser, it's not a traditional board game as such, but I started both presentations by playing this little snippet from John Bernthal. So he's an actor, he plays the Punisher, he was in The Walking Dead, and he has a podcast called The Real Ones, and he was interviewing his fellow Daredevil cast member, Deborah Ann Woll, who's she has also been on True Blood and many other shows, and she basically describes what it is in such a wonderful fashion. She is definitely a D&D expert and ambassador and does it as a living as well as her acting duty. So I played that, and the link for that video will be in the description below. And then I talked about how I got into Dungeons & Dragons in the 90s in high school, and I joked that I don't have any photos from my time playing D&D in high school, so I asked AI to generate an image of 1990s teenagers playing D&D. I can tell that it's fake because I didn't know that many girls in high school. But before I started playing Dungeons & Dragons, I played a game called Hero Quest, and that was a game released in 1991. It was a very cool game and instrumental for a lot of people like myself who played Dungeons & Dragons. It was kind of more of a mix of board game, role-playing D&D elements, and it has been re-released in 2021, and it's very accessible. You can get the new version of Hero Quest everywhere, and it's such a cool, fun, entry-level game to play, and they've been releasing expansions for it ever since. I then showed some photos of my kind of D&D books from my time in high school, which thankfully did survive, including the new easy to master Dungeons & Dragons game, which comes with like maps and little paper standees that you can use as characters, which is very cute, and all the modules that you could buy. It was a big trek for me growing up in Armidale, but having to travel to Perth to go to Tactics, which is a gaming institution here in Perth, in this wonderful they've moved recently, a few months ago, or about a year ago now, but they were located downstairs in Forest Chase in this wonderfully creepy but beautifully spooky kind of environment, and it really was and still is an institution. So it was a bit of a trek for me to get my D&D stories and modules, so I just started writing them myself, which is one of the wonderful things that D&D offers. It's very really stimulates the creative juices. It's very accessible and it's very adaptable. It gives you a framework with which to hang your imagination on. So that's a wonderful thing of many about Dungeons and Dragons. I spoke briefly about the history of Dungeons and Dragons. You would have seen in my first video from Nexus Toy Fair, I picked up this huge 800-page book all about the first 7 years history of Dungeons and Dragons. So you could give a whole presentation on the history of D&D by itself, but I gave a very brief description. Yeah, in the 70s and 80s, it really took off. There was a cartoon in the 80s. You may have seen the cameo of those cartoon characters from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoons in the Honor Among Thieves film from last year. I showed a classic 1980s TV ad of Dungeons and Dragons saying that it's family friendly because there was a thing all about moral panic and people were worried that D&D was of the occult and it was very evil and was going to influence their children negatively, which of course made teenagers want to play it even more. But now it's certainly a lot more family friendly. It's been through a lot of different editions. The 2014 5th edition is the most popular and is the one that is most widely played today, and they've just released their latest edition as well. I talked about how it's spun off into popular culture. Two of my favourite books on my shelf are Art and Arcana and Lore and Legends, which really detail the visual history of Dungeons and Dragons and all the concept art and all the ways it's touched culture and video games. Gary Gygax was in Futurama, it was in Community, there's toys, there's books, there's comics, Stranger Things obviously, and I show some of the toys on my Dungeons and Dragons dedicated shelf in my toy room, and gave Toymate a bit of a plug because they have a lot of cheap toys and board games, all Dungeons and Dragons related. One of the most common questions I get asked is, what do you actually need to play D&D? And as I said, D&D is a collaborative game. You basically sit around a table with your friends, you talk and you laugh a lot, you don't take things too seriously. Every now and then you'll roll dice and you write things down, but most of the time you'll just be talking and laughing and eating and drinking, and despite the name, there's not always a dungeon or a dragon involved. You could be set anywhere. A tavern, a cave, a ship, a mountaintop, a castle, a meadow, a gothic mansion, underwater, anywhere. But I did say that the first thing you need at D&D is what you'll need in life. And, I was more of a Seinfeld fan myself. There are tabletop role-playing games like D&D that you can play by yourself or are solo play, but obviously playing with friends rather than strangers, I find is always a bit more recommended. 4 to 6 is a good number. I've played with 9, I've played with 11 people, which is just too many, and not everyone can get involved when the group gets that big, and it's a lot for the Dungeon Master, who is basically the overseer, the narrator, the guide through the story to keep track of. So the first thing you'll need is friends to play it with. The second thing you'll need is somewhere to play it. You'll need a house. But I used to play it in the libraries in high school, as I said. I know a lot of libraries still do have that, and a lot of gaming shops have different open things. They could just come in, anyone can come in and just start playing D&D. There's lots of groups on Facebook where you can find other people, and so I mentioned the Dungeons and Flagons and the Dungeons and Dragons Perth groups on Facebook in both my presentation, and on some instances people came back to me on Instagram and said, I found a group on Facebook that I'm now playing with, I'm very happy. So that's very heartwarming and very awesome. There's also a thing called D&D in a Castle, which is exactly what you think it would be. It's basically an event held in the UK since 2019. It's not cheap, but yes, you basically get to play Dungeons and Dragons over a long weekend, a few days in a castle, and you have professional dungeon masters, there's catering provided, You have like medieval experiences like archery and falconry classes. It's pretty cool. I also watched a video on YouTube about Dungeons and Dragons being played in prisons if the wardens allow it, and how therapeutic and uniting that is. I thought that was pretty cool. And of course, you can play it online. There's an app and website, D&D Beyond. I've never played it online, but VTT, virtual tabletops, are a very popular thing. And obviously during the COVID lockdown days, Dungeons, Dragons and TTRPGs just shot up in popularity by about 33%, they reckon. So yes, playing virtually is definitely something that you can do too. These are some of the minis that I showed in both presentations, just to kind of show people what I use. So as I said, I play a half orc bard every 2 weeks with my D&D crew, but I run a game as a dungeon master probably every, 8 weeks or so with a regular crew, but also in between those different people. So I said in the presentations, both of them, that I think last year introduced D&D to about 30 people who had never played it before. And I love doing that. People are a bit tentative or a bit shy or whatever, but they all get into it. And as I said, I think that's the importance of playing with friends as well. You're just going to naturally just ease into that kind of stuff, and you don't mind kind of letting it all hang out and just let loose and just be silly for a few hours. But yeah, so these are some of the minis and some of the props and some of the examples of gameplay that I just took photos of and that I shared, including a 3D printed boat, as I said, thanks to my Dungeon Master. I love props and all that kind of stuff, and I'm always looking for cheap options for props that can be used for terrain or anything. You don't have to spend a lot of money, honestly. So you always have your eyes open, even for like op shops or gift stores or whatever. So you need friends to play it with, a house or somewhere to play it. You'll also need stationery. You need pencils and paper. Dungeon Masters love it when players take good notes, because DMs craft the story and tell the story, so they love it when people take notes and can remember what was said over the previous session. So sometimes in the midst of the session, there's often important names or events or places that come up in the game that will need to be remembered. You need to write things down in your character sheet, like when you take damage or when you lose or when you gain items. One of the most important things you'll need in D&D is dice. So most serious players, I guess, will have their own, but it's not necessarily. Usually the Dungeon Master has more than enough sets for everybody. Each D&D set is made up of 7 different dice: the D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20, which is the most frequently used, and a D100. And so whenever you see D4, that's a 4-sided dice, which is the pyramid kind of one. Whenever you see a D6, we're all familiar with that, a 6-sided dice. A D8 is an 8-sided dice, and so on. And how you tell these numbers is when you roll it, it's the number pointing up to the ceiling. So the topmost number is the number that you get. And there's a whole industry, created for different dice, and there's some very, very cool ones out there for sure. You need minis, like miniatures, to represent the characters and the players. You need terrain, props, but all that, to what extent, is up to the Dungeon Master. This was the slide that probably got the most laughs. I'm thankful that there's enough Hugh Jackman photos on the internet. But every character sheet, which is a double-sided character sheet, which tells you all of your stats and such, has these 6 ability scores, which are numbered. And so the strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom and charisma. And your Dungeon Master will sometimes ask you to roll a D20, a 20-sided dice, and then add your modifier, plus or minus, to see if you can do a particular thing. For example, charisma may be if you're trying to charm a barmaid, or befriend a prison guard so he can let your friends loose. Then you may roll a 20-sided dice, and if your charisma is like +3, then obviously you're quite a charismatic individual and you've got a greater chance of being successful in that. Your strength, if you're going to kick down a door, if you're a fighter, you're going to have a greater strength than, say, a rogue or a wizard. so that may be easier for you. So yes, every character has different strengths and different set of skills. Thank you, Liam Neeson, and thank you, Hugh Jackman. I finished both presentations just with some of the YouTubers and Instagram accounts that I follow. So Critical Role is a live action role playing. They're all a group of friends that have been playing it for over 10 years, and they're all professional Dungeons and Dragons players, and they're also professional voiceover artists. So all these American guys and girls, very talented, and they are like rock stars. They sell out stadiums and arenas and whatever. They've got millions and millions of views on YouTube. So, and I just mentioned a few local shops that are good to find things. I talked about the Lego minifigures, which are available at Kmart and Big W and Target and everywhere else. So that's a set of 12 blind box D&D characters. I'm glad to say that I have all of them now, which is pretty cool. Also mentioned a wonderful Time magazine Dungeons and Dragons issue, which is very hard to find here, but also a video all about Dungeons and Dragons and how it helps build communities, and it's very heartwarming. I've said heartwarming a lot in this video, haven't I? And I ended with prizes, which was so good to see. I just had some very basic questions, and then I threw out some prizes. Well, I didn't throw them out. People came and grabbed some dice and some miniatures and some of the starter sets and essentials kits, so people can start on their Dungeons and Dragons journey. But yeah, that was pretty awesome. And then I just thanked everybody for attending, and encouraged people to reach out to me on Instagram if they had any further questions or whatever. But yeah, I loved both of the presentations. I'm hoping that I can do more next year. I really just wanted it as an excuse for the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's really in the public consciousness more than it ever has been before, so people are aware of it and people are curious about what it is. I'm very glad I got back into the game 3+ years ago after playing it in high school, as I said. So this is a very brief rundown of my Dungeons and Dragons 50th anniversary celebration presentation, I guess. I'm very honoured to be able to have the opportunity to do that, and thanks to all of those who came and supported me and laughed at all my numerous jokes. So that is it. Thank you for watching. If you have played Dungeons & Dragons before, or if you're curious about what the game is, give me a comment down below, and I can lead you into some more resources as well. But all the description in the description of this video, hopefully I've put all the necessary stuff that you will find relevant and useful. So give it a go. Ask your friends if they're willing to play Dungeons & Dragons, and just go and grab yourself a starter set or essential kit. And good luck on your adventuring journey. Goodbye, geeks.